In Chapter 19, Gatria knew it was no problem for her to deflect Car's hammer, but the cyclone was a different story. There was more to it than just wind. There was a cold, sharp object inside it that wounded her. And there were tons of them. She knew she was at a disadvantage. It feels as though she was battling someone resembling them, an entity favored by a divine being. However, she couldn't feel a divine blessing of a deity from the woman's wind. What she senses was a kind of wind that defies the laws of nature. It's the exact contrast of Astrid's wind. Just who is this woman? As Gatria braced herself for the oncoming cyclone, her thoughts were all over the place. The blood dripping from her wounds quickly took the form of vines and wrapped themselves around her as if to shield her. It's coming. Gatria used the vines made from her blood to stop the cyclone, and she ordered a root from the tree she grew to encircle Car's midsection and pull him down. Gatria's expression became ugly when she witnessed her vines being ripped apart by the cyclone. And yet she kept weaving vines around herself for protection and extended a hand toward the eye of the cyclone. Her hand was being ripped apart, but it also continued regenerating. She may be at a disadvantage, but she was the mistress of nature, and her deity was the giver of life which she received in a form of healing. No matter how badly her attacker wounded her, as long as her blood and essence were pulsating on the soil of Azatura, death would be an impossible feat unless she willed it so. That's why she stuck her hand right into the eye of the cyclone and fearlessly grabbed the cold, sharp object inside, even if it sliced some of her fingers. She held on to it, and with tremendous effort, as she was being drawn into the cyclone and continually being injured, she pulled her torn, bleeding hand out. Gatria was mentally cursing as she watched her severed fingers regenerate when she caught sight of a black dragon rushing toward her. When her eyes met the dragon's, she smiled. How could she forget those gold eyes? Drago. The black dragon easily swooped Gatria onto its back and flew upward. I apologize for swooping in. Drago's voice spoke inside Gatria's head. No, I needed the help, thanks. Egatria unwrapped her palm that held the cold, sharp object she grabbed within the cyclone. What the? Ice? Wind and ice? She stared at the melting shard of ice in her hand and was lost for words. Be careful, Gatria. That woman could use wind and ice together. Gatria steeled and looked down on Drago. You know her? Yeah, why do you sound like you did something wrong? Gatria inquired. She's kind of in love with me. Her name is Ruraris. Egatria's brow furrowed as she turned to face the woman who was chasing after her and shrieking at her. So, am I being attacked now because of you? I think so, Gatria scowled. She did not like the fact that she was being attacked because of Drago, but for some reason she disliked it even more that this woman was connected to Drago. Stop running away, you coward wench. Iruraris lets out another shriek as she kicks her basilisk to go faster. It scared her to attack for fear of hurting Drago. Drago meanwhile snorted. As if a basilisk could chase down a dragon like him. Hang on, Gatria, I'm speeding up. Suddenly, Drago had the sensation that his back was empty. He turned his head and his dragon's jaw slackened when he saw Gatria jumping down and landing on Ruraris' basilisk. Gatria, the mistress of nature who just jumped down despite her fear of height, kicked Ruraris once she landed on the basilisk. Shortly later, Gatria subtly channeled her essence toward the basilisk under her feet. Ruraris was pushed back and glared at Gatria. I will kill you. Ruraris' cyclone was swiftly materializing in her palms. Gatria scoffed and smirked. Killing someone is much more satisfying when done with your own hands, don't you think so? She didn't wait for an answer. She closed the gap between them and launched a vicious attack on Ruraris with punches and kicks that would have killed anyone else. But Ruraris was no ordinary being. Putting her cyclone on standby, Ruraris blocked Gatria's onslaught. Yes, Ruraris sneered as she repelled every one of Gatria's blows. It would be more satisfying to kill a wench like you with my bare hand. Agatria mockingly chuckled. How cute, you want to kill me because of Drago, but Drago doesn't even like you. Ruraris became crazed. You? What? Gatria pulled her innocent face before she spun an attack with a back kick. Painful, she then began rapidly punching Ruraris while laughing. Some were blocked while others landed squarely. Gatria was unfazed, however. Hand-to-hand combat was her specialty. This woman, Ruraris noticed she was being pushed back. The mistress of nature's punches and kicks were becoming so quick and powerful that she was unable to block them all. I have to use my powers or I'm going to lose. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never summon a cyclone or even a moderate gale with a trace of ice. She was constantly disrupted by Gatria's kicking and punching. Arg, you wench, coward! Ruraris roared when she realized what Gatria was up to. The mistress of nature was preventing her from using her powers. Gatria smiled sweetly. I don't enjoy being at a disadvantage, you see. From pure rage, a grin started to spread across Ruraris' lips. Gatria was so focused on her, completely oblivious to the fact that a hammer was flying toward her. But Ruraris' grin fell when the black dragon's tail slammed into the hammer and sent it flying back. I'll handle Car. After telling Gatria this, Drago transformed back into his humanoid form and landed a few feet in front of Car. Gatria's smile became twisted after she realized what had happened. Awa, that must have hurt, seeing your beloved saving other woman. Ruraris snapped and quickly summoned a storm with shards of ice in her hands. She had already spent much of her strength, so this was her last chance to make something big that could kill the mistress of nature. Because of the toll it had on her body, she could only use it once. On the other hand, Gatria made a shield on her left hand while holding a sword on the left. Her stance was that of a fierce warrior. What could a useless vine shield do against my destructive powers? Ruraris sneered. Some mistress of nature you are. Gatria smiled behind her shield. You clearly don't know nature, let me educate you. Gatria's words prompted a sneer from Ruraris, and she readied herself to let loose the storm she had created. Drop her. Ruraris did not understand those words. The fact that Gatria was the one to leap down further confused Ruraris, until the basilisk started trashing and wreaking havoc to throw off its rider. You useless beast, what are you doing? Even as Ruraris tried to maintain her balance, the now fearless basilisk continued to trash until Ruraris lost her footing and fell. The basilisk wasted no time in plunging forward to catch Gatria. Good boy. Gatria patted the basilisk after it puts her on its back and flew up. Gatria heard Ruraris screaming and calling her names, but she didn't turn around to face her. You were very brave, Eras. After being rubbed on the back by Gatria once again, the basilisk flew in a wave to express its joy. Gatria smiled at that. As soon as she landed on the basilisk earlier, she began channeling her essence into it, and she kept doing so even as she battled Ruraris. The blessing she received was not only limited to healing and tending to nature. As an overseer of Azatura, taming wild beasts was just as easy as breathing to her, especially a beast like Eras, who loathed its owner. Fly toward the ruined palace, Eras. The basilisk listened and flew past toward the palace. While Drago continued to fight Car and prevent the warlord from pursuing Gatria, Ruraris let loose the storm she had created with a loud shriek filled with fury and commanded it to chase Gatria. Gatria gritted her teeth, seeing the storm destroying everything it passes below while chasing after her. Worried that it might hurt her allies below, she told Eras to fly toward the top of the gigantic tree she made. Just as she suspected, the storm followed her. "Go save yourself," Gatria told the basilisk after it brought her to the gigantic tree. Eras, however, was unwilling to part with Gatria and instead attempted to wrap her in its wings to protect her from the coming storm. "All right, let's face it together," she told the basilisk before kneeling on one knee on the top of the tree and pressing her palm on its branch. "Can you take that storm?" The tree responded with, "I will protect my mistress." Egatria smiled at that. "All right, protect me as best as you can, I will do the same." The leaves rustled even though there was no breeze. The tree seemed pleased that Gatria would defend it as well. Soon after that, the tree started to move. The branches moved down to form a protective sphere around Gatria and Eras. Every part of the tree, from the roots to the highest leaves, shifted to shield Gatria. On the other hand, Gatria spilled her blood for the sake of the tree. In order to weather the upcoming storm, only a few breaths after it encased them, Gatria felt the storm closing in. The tree began to tremble, and Gatria could sense the tree's distress from the sound it was making as the storm drew nearer. She felt helpless and could only give more of her blood in response. The tree groaned in protest, as if it were wailing from agony. However, it protected its mistress from the tempest outside. The tree moaned and swayed in the wind, but it held firm and did not fall. Its roots were expanding rapidly underground, absorbing all the blood and all the essence of its mistress and turning it into its strength. Gatria smiled and patted the tree. "You're amazing." The foliage started to open as if it was a flower blooming in the spring. The storm had disappeared, and the first thing she saw was Riraris surrounded by the wind and flying toward her. She's angrier than ever, but Gatria just continued to look down on her. That look, those belittling eyes. Riraris wanted to gouge out those eyes and feed it to that useless beast beside the owner of those infuriating eyes. Even if she had used up most of her strength, she was still capable of doing some things. Even though she couldn't make another storm, her wind would be more than enough to cause a severe injury to that wench. Ruraris was very confident that she could fight off the mistress of nature, who continued to bleed. Even in her state, Ruraris knew she could defeat that infuriating woman. What could a tree do? What could those vines do? Then Ruraris saw Gatria smirked, ominous. Ruraris sensed this and sped up toward Gatria, but it was already too late. Gatria already had it prepared after the storm came. Ruraris saw Gatria raised her hand and flicked it upward. As Ruraris looked down in response to the rumbling on the ground, she was just in time to witness multiple roots rapidly sprung up from the ground, and it continued to grow until they reached Ruraris. Ruraris evaded their grasp by dodging and severing the roots trying to grab her. She then turned the air currents surrounding her into razor-sharp wind blades and severed any root that dared try to hold her back. But no matter how many she cut, new roots appeared. Ruraris was getting exhausted. The roots continued to attack and restrained her, and the most infuriating of this all was the mistress of nature watching her struggle with a smirk on her face. "Arg!" Ruraris shouted in anger and decided to just evade the roots and head to Gatria. However, more roots shot up to the sky and restrained Ruraris like snakes trying to choke and devour her. She tried to fight off all the roots with her wind, but she already spent a lot of strength. Her speed was decreasing, and the large roots that she could barely cut now were rapidly enclosing her in a circular jail. Ruraris let out a scream of fury as she exhausted herself trying to break free of the round prison made by large roots. She began hacking away at the wooden cage, but it was too sturdy, and whenever she severed a root, another one quickly grew in its place. The tree roots could only regenerate again and again because of all the blood and essence of their mistress that they had absorbed from the soil. The roots had drained the entire city of Ager dry, and its soil had now become dead. Screw this. Iruraris was about to shriek when she heard the mistress of nature's voice. Stay there for a bit, I'm too weak to kill you right now. I'll come back after I take back my regalia. The mistress of nature's regalia. Ruraris knew, of all people, what it was and why it was very important. Regalia was bestowed on the four queens of Ither together with their elemental divine blessing. They were divine items crafted by the deities themselves. And with that regalia, the blessing strength of the deities doubled in strength. They gifted it to the kingdom of Tretera after the Ither's siege as part of the payment for their participation. Ruraris didn't mind if Gatria got it back, but then Gatria would be an even bigger pain in the ass. If I could stop her from taking it back, wouldn't it make the Grand Commander happy? Ruraris laughed at that and continued using what little power she had left to get free. At the same time, on the tree top, Eras spread its wings and flew down after Gatria got on its back. Gatria looked down and saw Kar and Drago still fighting, but Drago's nonchalant face made it very clear who was winning. At the same moment, human beings dressed in fancy clothes fled the palace toward the direction of the city gates. The normal citizen of the city had already escaped the capital with the help of the Itherleaver group prior to the chaos in the palace. Trevin had secretly approached them a day before to talk to their leaders about evacuating the citizens before giving them thousands of gold tear to hire hunters to help them cross the barren land and supply food for their journey. Naturally, Trevin did not put all of his faith in them. Druids and harpies were hiding in the shadows to keep an eye on the Itherleaver activity. He also had a spy in the Hunters Guild who was continually reporting back to him. Those people must be the nobles and wealthy merchants. After a brief pause, Gatria told Eras to go down to the ruined palace. On the way, Gatria discarded 2 cloaks and donned new ones. She only had 2 left of the cloak made by King Turak. Because of Ruraris, I've used more than I intended to, but it barely matters. That's how much value there was in the intelligence I gained. Suddenly, she heard a buzzing sound coming from her storage ring. Trevin was contacting through her communication crystal. Gatria hurriedly answered. Trev, where are you? Are you okay? That's not important right now. There was an urgency in Trevin's voice. Plume and her group, they found your regalia, Gatria. CECELIBCC.